This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight is a very important person, very significant person. Many of you know him, and many of you know what he is famous or infamous for. My guest, and I'm welcoming him to the show tonight, is John Kiriaku. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Regis. Thanks for having me.
Well, everybody knows that you were a CIA operative. You went to jail because you blew the whistle on the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, waterboarding. Mm-hmm. You spent time in a federal prison. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that. John, I'm a guy that's an old school kind of journalist. I taught journalism many years ago in a high school in Arizona, and it was who, what, how, why, when, and where. I want to get at the who and the what and the how about you. I'm not sure that I know a lot about you, and I'm not sure a lot of people do. So, John, I would like to begin with a little bit about your background. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that your background, that you're Greek.
Yes.
I'd like to know about your family. I'd like to know about where you grew up. I'd like to know, were you influenced by the Greek Orthodox religion? Mm-hmm. And I'd like to know about your education. Mm-hmm. And that will lead me, John, into, I know you went to the university at the George Washington University, right in downtown Washington, D.C., yep. And I want to know why, and then I want to know, what came of it. So, John, if you don't mind, let's start with you as a very young lad, where you grew up, what your family was like, how you were influenced by your Greek heritage and by perhaps the Orthodox Church in your early education.
Yeah, I got this right here. I am a devout Greek Orthodox Christian. I was born and raised in Western Pennsylvania, very rural Western Pennsylvania, Amish country, about an hour north of Pittsburgh. And I'm the eldest son, the eldest child of three. I have a brother and a sister. Our parents, Chris and Stella Kiriaku, also were from that area, from Western Pennsylvania. My dad and my mom from Eastern Ohio. All four of my grandparents came from the Greek island of Rhodes, which had been under Turkish occupation for almost 400 years, and then Italian occupation starting in 1917 and extending to 1949. And growing up in a little town, the church becomes the most important center of culture and music, and just that's where your friends are in the whole community. So it was very important to us. My grandparents all stressed education. If you want to make a better life for yourself, the only way to do that is through education. So here, none of my four grandparents went to college. Only my father's mother finished high school. And so because they didn't have an education, they wanted their children to have an education. My father ended up getting a bachelor's degree in music, a master's degree in education, and a PhD in music education. My mother got a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in education. And then this fascination with the rest of the world started early with me. I went to an auction with my dad when I was 8 or 9 years old. And he bought a mystery box for 50 cents. I still remember it. And the box had mostly just junk in it, but it had also a shortwave radio. And he gave me that radio. And it opened up the entire world to me. Everything from Radio Moscow to the BBC to Radio Havana. And there was a station I used to listen to regularly in Quito, Ecuador, and the Voice of Greece. And the whole world ended up being right there at my fingertips. A year later, when I was 9 years old, I told my parents that I wanted to be a spy when I grew up. They bought me a set of walkie-talkies that Christmas, indulging a child, wanting to be a spy or a fireman or a doctor or whatever. But I was serious. And when I was 16, I told them that I wanted to be a spy in the Middle East, specifically. My father was apoplectic. He begged me to think about sciences, go to school to be a dentist. A dentist was a big deal. Biologist, a doctor, anything, just not a spy. But I went to George Washington University in Washington the week after I turned 18 years old. And I stayed there for 4 years just because it was the very center of the action. It's 2 blocks from the White House. I got a degree in Middle Eastern studies. All the while I was volunteering on Capitol Hill, working for a member of Congress, Joseph Coulter, my congressman from Western Pennsylvania. Learned a lot. Decided to stay for graduate school and got a degree, a master's degree in legislative affairs with a focus on foreign policy analysis. And as it turned out, my graduate school advisor was actually a CIA officer who was undercover as a graduate school advisor. And he recruited me into the CIA. My parents were very, very proud. They were always worried, especially when I would go overseas. And I went overseas all the time. I've been to 72 countries. But they were proud, and things worked out. It's been a long road, Reggie. I'll tell you the truth. I heard a joke yesterday that really encapsulates my life. How do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans. And that's kind of how it worked out for me. It's definitely not what I had planned.
That's really interesting. I've been wanting to know a little bit about that background. Western Pennsylvania, Greek Orthodoxy, your parents' emphasis on education. And you really surprised me that at an early age, you knew you wanted to be a spy.
I did.
Now, what years were those? I just like to know what years were those that you were growing up.
Well, I told them that when I was 9. So that was 1973. And then I remember as clearly as if it were yesterday, my mom and dad took my brother and sister and me to visit our grandparents. We visited my grandparents every single Sunday, and they visited us every single Thursday. So we were only about 15 miles away from each other. So we were together all the time. And I remember we went for Christmas, 1975. And as soon as we walked in the house, my grandfather said, "They killed the CIA man in Athens." And my father said, "What do you mean?" And he said, some group, some assassins, they killed the CIA man in Athens. He must have been spying on Greece. And my father said, "No, Dad, the CIA has people all over. They cooperate with other governments." And I don't know why that stuck in my head, but I was, 11 years old then. And I remember thinking, oh, I want a piece of that action. And the truth too is that, and I only realized this as an adult, but I'm an adrenaline junkie and I get bored easily. And so I need excitement in my life all the time to keep me engaged and interested in things. And now I'm not a kid. I'm 61 years old, and I still feel like I need that excitement all the time.
Well, you talked about your father buying that little mystery kit and giving you a shortwave radio. I'm a few years older than you, obviously, but I got interested in amateur radio when I was still in grade school. I got my first license.
Oh, do you remember your call letters?
Yeah, K1KNJ. It's still my call.
I was WD3AA.
Oh my God. I still hold an extra class license. I'm not active here in Russia. I haven't been able to find anybody locally, but anyway, that opened the world to me as well. I wasn't just listening to shortwave. I was talking with people all over the world, people in the Soviet Union. Anyway, and then the walkie-talkies. I had to laugh when you told me that they gave you this gift. And anyway, I want to get back to George Washington University, and that you were recruited. Now, why do you think you were recruited?
Oh, I can tell you exactly why. So in graduate school, I was taking a class called The Psychology of Leadership. Most fascinating class I've ever taken at any time. It was taught by an eminent, highly respected psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Gerald Post. Jerry had a bachelor's degree in psychology from Yale, a master's in psychology from Yale, a PhD in psychology from Yale, and a PhD in political science from Yale. And then he got a medical degree from Harvard. They don't get much more intelligent than Jerry Post was. And so he was teaching us this class. And I'll tell you why I was so interested. One day we began talking about the Yalta Conference. And at the start of the course, he said, does anybody know why the Yalta Conference was held at Yalta? It's such a simple question and such a complicated answer. None of us knew. And there were about, I'm going to say 6 or 7 people in the class. And so he said, I'll tell you why the conference was held in Yalta. Because Stalin had spies in the White House. And his spies told him that Roosevelt was sick. And so Stalin insisted that the talks be held in the Soviet Union. So to get there, Roosevelt had to go all the way around the war. He took a train. It's not like today where you just get on Air Force One and just fly off. He had to take a train to Norfolk, Virginia, get on a ship. The ship took him all the way to Malta, and then from Malta, a ferry to southern Italy, then another train, and then finally a flight to Yalta. When Roosevelt arrived, he was exhausted, and all he wanted to do was go to sleep. But Stalin insisted that the talks begin immediately. And just so he could go to sleep, Roosevelt conceded Poland to the Soviet Union. And he said, that is the importance of intelligence and psychology at the same time. I was hooked. Well, he then assigned us to write a paper, a psychological evaluation of our bosses. I was working at a labor union at the time, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. And my boss, I was a little bit afraid of my boss. He was a big, mean, angry, strong, old school union organizer. So I'm following him for the week, just at his side, making notes, jotting ideas down. Halfway through the week, we got into an argument, and I called him a racist, which he was. He hated black people. He got so angry, he balled up his fists like this to punch me. And I put up my hands to protect myself. And then he said, my penis is bigger than yours. I said, what? He said, my penis is bigger than yours. And I said, you know what? You are insane. I quit. And I walked out. I went back to my apartment, energized. I wrote the paper. And this wasn't just, John telling the story of what just happened. This was an in-depth academic paper with dozens of footnotes referring to the DSM and, very heavy psychological texts. And so I turned the paper in. A week later, I got it back and I got an A. But in the margin of the paper, he wrote, "Please see me after class." So I went to see him. He walked me down to his office, closed the door, and said, "Look, I'm not really a professor here. I'm a CIA officer undercover as a professor here. And I'm looking for people who would fit into the CIA's culture." He said, "You would fit into the CIA's culture. Do you want to be a CIA officer?" The truth was, I was getting married in 6 weeks and I didn't have a job. And I had always wanted to be a spy anyway. So I was recruited into the CIA not as a spy, but as an analyst on the strength of that paper. And I ended up spending the first 7.5 years of my career as an analyst before making a very unusual switch to counterterrorism operations in the Middle East, just like I had said when I was 16.
John, I got to tell you, we have some mutual friends, Ray McGovern.
Oh, yeah. Ray's like a mentor and a hero to me.
Ray has been a dear friend since way back in 2016 when I interviewed him in Washington, D.C. at the Carmelite Orders Theological House in Washington. And he's been on my show so many times. Anyway, he was an analyst. And
Yes.
he makes it clear that he was an analyst. And I really respect his opinion, as so many people do. He's very popular today all over the place, commenting on what's going on in Russia because, you know, the Soviet desk, the Russian desk was his job. I have to ask you this, though. You started out, you said, as an analyst. What was it? What was the turning point that you became a operative or an agent, or what is it you would call yourself? And how did that happen?
Well, the agents are the people that we recruit. So I was a CIA officer or an operative, a field operative, a case officer, an ops officer. There are lots of different terms. Agent is not one of them. The agent is the person that we recruit. I can tell you exactly what it was. From the day I was hired, I worked on Iraq. And this was, 8 months before Iraq invaded Kuwait. As soon as that invasion took place, I became a star and I moved up very quickly. But by 1997, it was clear to me that Saddam Hussein was not going anywhere. And I didn't want to spend the next 20 years just saying the same thing over and over and over. Saddam could threaten the Kurds. Saddam could threaten the Shia. Saddam could threaten Kuwait. Saddam will violate sanctions. How many times can you say that over the course of how many years? And then a job opened up for a counterterrorism operations officer in Athens. And it said the successful candidate will speak either Greek or Arabic. And as it turned out, I was literally the only person in the entire CIA who spoke both Greek and Arabic. And so I got the job. They sent me through all of the operational training courses over the course of, another year. And then I went to Athens.
Let me jump in and ask you this. I can understand how you probably were fluent in Greek because you grew up in a Greek family. Is that right?
Yes.
What about Arabic? When did you study that?
In order to be promoted to the senior intelligence service at the CIA, you have to do a rotation in another directorate and a rotation in the policy community. So I was given a 2-year rotation to the State Department, where I served as the economic officer in the American Embassy in Bahrain from 1994 to 1996. But for a full year before going to Bahrain, I studied Arabic, 9 hours a day, 11 and a half months, complete immersion. And they taught me to speak Arabic fluently. It's a fantastic language school that the CIA has, as good as the State Department's language school. And so when I went out to Bahrain, I went out with Arabic to the point where my Arabic was actually better than my Greek for a while. And I remember the ambassador Ambassador David Ransom, just a fantastic human being. He complimented me. He heard me speaking Arabic once, and he complimented me, and he said, "Boy, I think your Arabic might be better than mine." And then a couple of months into that tour, he made an appointment to meet with the Minister of Awqaf and Islamic Affairs. And this was not a minister that an American ambassador would meet routinely, but he wanted to, pay a courtesy call and, "Hi, how are you? I'm the American ambassador," that kind of thing. So I went with him as his translator. And I remember when we came out of the meeting, as we were walking out, the minister says, "Your Arabic is excellent, young man." And I said, "Thank you, Excellency. That's a great compliment." So I felt very, very comfortable operating in Arabic.
Okay, so you went to Greece, and how long were you there? What did you do?
I was there for 2 years, from 1998 to 2000. And for the most part, I was there to work against a very deadly, dangerous group called Revolutionary Organization 17 November. There were others. There was the Popular Revolutionary Struggle, but they focused mostly on killing Greek policemen. 17 November had killed the CIA station chief, 2 U.S. defense attachés, an American Air Force airman, the British defense attaché, the Turkish ambassador, the Turkish deputy ambassador. They fired rockets at the French ambassador, the German ambassador, the British ambassador. This is a very, very deadly group. They murdered the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Communications, the governor of the central bank. Very lethal. So that's what I spent most of my time on. But, and this was the reason I needed the Arabic, the Abu Nidal organization was there, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP General Command, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PKK, the Libyans, the Iraqis. Athens was a crossroads for every murderous terrorist group, within 5,000 miles.
John, let me ask you something. Now, you were working in counterterrorism, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Were you dressed like you are now? Were you in some kind of disguise, or?
For the most part, no. I mean, I dressed. Right now I'm wearing blue jeans and a $20 sweatshirt, thanks to Costco. But yeah, I mostly dress like this every day. Now, when there were high threat meetings, yes, of course, I would wear a disguise. Whenever we had somebody walk into the embassy and offer information, of course, I would wear a disguise. I was also very heavily armed. We were all heavily armed. And I never left for an operation without, bulletproof vest front and back, and a 9mm on my waist, a 38 on my ankle, even a buck knife in my back pocket, just in case things really went bad. So it was a tough job. There's no question about it.
And so what did you end up doing?
Well, you know what? To put it most succinctly, I recruited spies to steal secrets and to use those secrets to disrupt terrorist attacks against American citizens, American installations, or American soil. I
find that really interesting.
Well, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you for 1 second. Later on in my career, after I returned to headquarters from Pakistan, I was the executive assistant to the CIA's deputy director for operations. And he used to say something as a mantra every day. The job of the CIA is to recruit spies, to steal secrets, and to analyze those secrets to allow the policymakers to make the best informed policy. And that was true until 9/11. It was true between, let's say, 1975 and 9/11, with some exceptions during the Reagan administration, which we can talk about. But the CIA was a rogue organization from its founding in 1947 to 1975. My view is that it again became a rogue organization after September 11th.
All right, well, take me down that path, because I have been under the impression that the CIA has been a rogue organization ever since Allen Dulles created it. So how did it change? How did it again become a rogue organization? What was the agenda?
Well, it would be better, I think, to start with why it temporarily stopped being a rogue organization. What stopped it was the Church Committee and the Pike Committee. In 1975 and 1976, Senator Frank Church in the U.S. Senate and Congressman Otis Pike in the House held simultaneous hearings that exposed the CIA for what it was. It was an organization not encumbered by the rule of law. It was overthrowing governments. It was murdering people. It was spying on American citizens. It was doing anything it damn well pleased. And that came to a screeching halt in 1975. And when Dr. Post first pitched me with this job, there was a woman I was going to school with whose fiance was in the CIA. And I asked her if she would set up a dinner for the two of us because I had some questions. And so he and I went to dinner, and I said, look, I'm a student of history. I know what the CIA did. I remember the Church Committee hearings and the Pike Committee hearings. So why should I believe that the CIA today is any different than the CIA of 1975? And he said, it truly is. These committees, the Church Committee became the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. The Pike Committee became the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And there really was oversight. That oversight began to drop off during the Reagan presidency with the war in Nicaragua. The CIA went rogue again, selling arms to Iran to then take the cash and funnel the cash through Adnan Khashoggi to the Contra rebels, and then allowing cocaine to enter the United States, which led to the crack epidemic of the 1980s. It was a mess. And then Bill Clinton was elected. When Bill Clinton first became president, he instituted something at the CIA called the Great Cull, where he said that the CIA had to sever its relations with any source who had what he called a problem with human rights. I thought that was a joke. But the CIA did sever relations with fully a third of its sources around the world. And I remember saying to a colleague of mine at the time, they're actually serious about this. So we're going to have a CIA that actually respects human rights. I'm sorry to say that lasted only for 8 years. And then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, as Cofer Black famously said, the gloves came off. And, look at it this way. 9/11 was the greatest intelligence failure in American history. And this desire for revenge took over. Not just the Counterterrorism Center, but the whole of the CIA. And so when you've got a president who really doesn't really understand anything and a vice president who wants you to kill everything that moves and a Congress that gives you more money than you can possibly spend in a lifetime, then you do whatever you want to do. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Okay, let me try to dig a little bit deeper because I'm very curious now. Is there any government oversight? Does the president have any say in what the CIA does? Does Congress? Are they really rogue? And if they're rogue, whose bidding are they doing?
Well, I'm going to disagree with something you said at the very start of our conversation. I do believe that the CIA reports to the president, works for the president, and carries out the president's policies. It's the presidents who are the problem. We don't need to point the finger at, some shadowy businessman somewhere or some billionaire or some banking titan on Wall Street. The dangerous psychopaths are in the White House. And so, and this is not partisan at all. It doesn't matter if there's a Democrat in the White House or a Republican in the White House. It doesn't matter one iota. Presidents are consumed by power. Presidents are, by their very definition, sociopaths. You have to be a sociopath to even think that you should be president of the United States. And so when the CIA director comes to you and says, you know, we have to fight them over there so that we don't have to fight them over here, you tell him to do whatever needs to be done, right? You're the president. You have to protect American citizens and American installations and American soil. And so if that means sending a team out to wherever, you know, the Middle East or Southeast Asia or wherever the terrorists happen to be, that's what they do. And they blow their brains out, or they kidnap them and take them to a third country where they'll just be disappeared in some torture chamber someplace. And then we don't have to worry about that person somehow getting a visa and coming to the United States to carry out another 9/11 attack.
Wow. So, wow. The presidents are the sociopaths.
Oh yeah, when you did your intro, I thought, oh, he's giving the president far too much credit for being a normal human being. They're not normal human beings. They're sociopaths.
Let me ask you this, John. Do you think they're also puppets? Are they really the ones who set and decide foreign policy? I have a hard time believing that now.
They are.
They are.
Oh yeah, sure they are.
Well, school me on this, because I can't believe that that Joseph Biden and even Donald Trump, and I want to talk about Donald Trump with you in terms of what's going on in his administration, but are they really the ones who determine foreign policy?
Yeah, I mean, they're advised by kind of a wide circle of people. But yeah, there's no shadowy group above the president, you know, pulling his strings or whispering into his ear what he needs to do, giving him his marching orders. It's the president that runs this foreign policy. And another thing too is these oversight committees are useless, worthless. It's the CIA, for example, that controls the security clearances that the oversight committee members need to carry out oversight. And so if you're overseeing a little too much, they'll pull your security clearance, and then you can't oversee anything. I remember doing an operation with my colleagues overseas one time, and something went bad, and one of our recruited agents went rogue, and so the rules were very clear that we had to inform Congress, inform the congressional oversight committees. And the station chief specifically ordered me not to cable Congress. And I said, really? I said, the rules are pretty clear. He said, Congress doesn't need to know about this. And so I never wrote the cable.
Well, you know, I'm not the only one. There's an awful lot of people. You call them conspiracy theorists. You call them political analysts. These people are believing that there is some other agenda and some power above.
Oh, Reggie, listen, I've had people with a completely straight face come up to me after speaking events and insist that 9/11 was carried out by the lizard people who came from another planet. I'm totally serious. People yell at me. I'm so unpopular in these 9/11 truth events because I say it wasn't the Jews. It wasn't the Bush family. It wasn't the Saudi royal family. It wasn't the bankers. It wasn't the space aliens. It was Al-Qaeda. It was Al-Qaeda. We watched it unfold in slow motion over the course of 4 years as they plotted and planned and plotted and planned and threatened us the whole time. So no, it wasn't the Jews, the Bushes, the Saudis, the communists, the this, the that. It was Al Qaeda.
So I guess I can understand why you would be so unpopular at these 9/11 truth conferences.
Well, they fight amongst themselves over whether it was the lizard people or the Jews or the Russians or. My time is far too valuable to get bogged down in their silliness. I'm not willing to do it.
Well, okay, I'm not going to linger on that then.
Listen. When they threaten us from 1997 to 2001, telling us we're going to attack you, we're going to attack you, we're going to attack you, and we're listening to their chatter, and their camp commanders are on the phone with their students crying and saying, "I'll see you in paradise." And then 9/11 happens. And then Osama bin Laden issues a statement through Al Jazeera saying that they're planning a second attack that will dwarf 9/11. Why would then I think that it was the Bushes or the Jews or the lizard people or the space aliens? I leave that to the pea brains to have that argument with each other.
Yeah, I understand. So in terms of an agenda, how would you describe the agenda of the CIA today and in just the last few years? What is their agenda? Is there an agenda?
The agenda changes, really. I mean, it changes based on what the president tells them to do. But this is part of the problem. Presidents order the CIA to do lots of very illegal things. I'll give you an example. My first boss at the CIA started off as a graduate school fellow. It's like an internship, but for promising graduate students. So he's 22 years old, and his first job at the CIA is in the Counterintelligence Center. And at the time, it was led by a dark, notorious figure named James Jesus Angleton. And when he went into the office on his very first day, a secretary gave him a tour. And she pointed to this entire wall of files, right? Hard copy files. We didn't have computers back then. And she pointed at the wall and she said, "Listen, whatever you do, don't look in those files." Well, he said he's 22 years old. What's he going to do as soon as the first time he's alone in the office? He ran straight to the files to look at them. And he said every single one of those files was on an American citizen. Now, it is patently illegal for the CIA to spy on Americans. Yet we've gotten to the point where that's almost all that NSA does. They spy on Americans. They read our emails, our text messages. They listen to our phone calls. They record everything. And they keep it in a repository in the Utah desert. So, the CIA didn't do that on its own just because it felt like it. The CIA did that because they had been told by the president to do it. The buck has to stop somewhere. I think that distracting people by saying, well, it's a cabal of bankers on Wall Street that calls the shots, or it's the Trilateral Commission, or it's the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, that just muddies the water. And that's what presidents want us to do. They want our attention to be diverted to other people. They want us to point the finger at other people so we don't point the finger at them.
Wow. Let me ask you this. A lot of people today are questioning and affirming that the CIA and MI6 are working intimately together.
Well, that's not a secret. That's public information.
Okay, so let's transition as we can to Ukraine. I'm living here in Yalta, and we're getting bombarded daily by drones. Not here in Yalta yet, but within 30 or 40 kilometers of us, in the Black Sea and in the Azov Sea, the Kerch Bridge, and President Trump has said, "I've got this this 28-point plan.
Mhm.
And are those sirens on
Sorry
your
about
end?
that. Yeah, the fire trucks every day, all day long. Yes.
Okay. And there's no secret that Boris Johnson interfered with the signing of the Minsk agreement.
Yes.
I don't think it's any secret that the MI6, along with the CIA, are heavily invested in Ukraine. Can you confirm or can you contradict that?
I can give you an educated guess. I would be shocked if the CIA and MI6 were not in Ukraine in large numbers. This is what the CIA does. This is the reason for being, the reason for having a CIA. And the job of the CIA in the case of the Ukraine conflict, I think, is pretty easy to discern. It is to cause as much trouble as possible for the Russian military. That's really what it comes down to. The CIA, at the CIA, we're not combat troops, and so they're there for they would be there for training, for advice, operational advice, operational recommendations. The goal would be to bog the Russians down as deeply as possible.
Let me ask you this. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts as a professional, as an American citizen? What are your thoughts about this conflict in Ukraine?
Well, Ray McGovern and I have talked about this a lot, and we're both of the position that, look, if we're going to be peace activists, we have to be peace activists, and we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent with the viewpoint that war is wrong and peace is good, and all combatants or quasi-combatants in this conflict should allow the diplomats to do what diplomats are paid to do and negotiate a settlement. I have felt that way from the very moment the first Russian troop crossed into Ukrainian territory, that this needs to be negotiated. Now, with that said, this war did not begin just a couple of years ago. It began in 2014. And this is something that most Americans don't know. And of the Americans who do know, they have lied to themselves to convince themselves otherwise.
I've been coming here since 2016. In fact, my first trip before coming to Russia was to Odessa on the second anniversary of the massacre. And I learned for the first time what Russian-speaking people in Odessa believed. And then I came back again in 2016 to Russia, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Crimea. Came to Crimea to try to learn from the people there about the truth of Crimea returning to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned the truth. And ever since then, I've been trying to convey that in hundreds and hundreds of videos and podcasts and films. And I think you're absolutely right that the American public have no idea.
No idea.
What John McCain, Lindsey Graham,
Mm-hmm.
Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt did to orchestrate that coup with $5 billion for democracy effort in Ukraine, and that triggered the whole thing. And it's been very, very unfortunate. Now, I want to get to you became a peace activist. You are really good friends with my good friend Ray McGovern. He will see this interview. And I want to ask you this. What was it that made you become a whistleblower, that made you expose the CIA enhanced torture techniques, waterboarding? What was it? Something in your conscience? Was it something from your religious background? Was it a moral decision? Could you share that with me?
Yeah, it was more of an ethical and moral decision than anything else. When I put my hand up in the air on January the 7th, 1990, and I swore to uphold and to protect the Constitution against all enemies, domestic and foreign, I meant it. I meant it. I knew that torture was illegal. We wrote the United Nations Convention Against Torture. The United States wrote it. I say this all the time. In 1945 and 1946, we executed Japanese soldiers who had waterboarded American prisoners of war during World War II. In 1968, an American soldier in Vietnam who was caught waterboarding a Vietnamese prisoner received 20 years at hard labor at Fort Leavenworth, the federal penitentiary there, the military prison at Fort Leavenworth. The law never changed. So how is waterboarding somebody a death penalty offense in 1945, worthy of 20 years at hard labor in 1968, but then like magic in 2002, it's somehow legal because we're the good guys? It wasn't. It was patently illegal. And I was unwilling to be a participant in an overtly illegal act like torture.
Were you still a member of the CIA, or were you already out of the CIA when you blew the whistle?
When I first objected internally, I was still, of course, in the CIA, but then I went public, 3.5 years after I left the CIA. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so 3.5 years after. And obviously you paid the price for that. You spent some 30 months in a federal prison.
Mm-hmm.
You've written books about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that people will, if they're not aware, will begin to look for you online. I'll put some of those credits in the description of the show. I want to come back to, again, the CIA today.
Mm-hmm.
Are they rogue today? Are they still a rogue organization, or are they operating under the direct supervision of the President of the United States and the oversight of the Congress? What's the status today?
Yeah, I don't think they're rogue. No. Rogue to me means out of control. And they're very much in the control of the president. So I think that for the most part, they're carrying out whatever policy the president behind closed doors tells them to carry out. I doubt that they are submitting to very much in the way of congressional oversight because they know they don't have to. They know they're going to get away with it. So no, I don't consider them to be a rogue organization. They're not working for the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds or the Vanderbilts. They're doing whatever they want to do, and 99% of the time it aligns with what the president wants them to do.
Okay, I have to ask you this. You know, I've lived here now in Yalta for going on almost 6 years. I've interacted with Russians of all types, journalists, politicians, ordinary citizens, diplomats, and I've interacted with people from around Europe, Central Asia. And all of these people talk about, not with any sense of kindness, but the presence of the U.S. CIA, the USAID, and soft power in their countries.
Mm-hmm.
I could rattle off a list of these countries without revealing who these people were, but they go from Serbia, they go from Germany, they go from Austria, they go from Armenia, Azerbaijan, they go for Georgia, all highly resentful of the meddling of the United States in their internal affairs. Now, as a peace activist, a former CIA agent, how would you respond to these friends of mine?
Well, welcome to real life. This is what governments do. I would ask them why they're not outraged at the Chinese use of soft power. The Chinese own half of Europe and all of Africa, and now they're moving into South America. Where's the outrage against the Chinese? They're not wrong. Of course, the United States uses soft power. Of course, they use USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy and any number of other organizations. That's real life. That's just the way it is. Now, their governments can certainly refuse, U.S. aid. They can scale back the size of the American embassy. They can refuse visas. They can do any number of things, and they don't. So, to on the one hand have one hand out for American money, and then the other hand pointing the finger and saying, those Americans, they want something from us for their money. It's like, come on, grow up. Take one or take the other. You can't take both at the same time.
All right. With the little time we have left, I want to ask you about Russia. Do you feel that Russia has been and is an aggressor? Do you feel that NATO and now most of Europe, including the new recent ones, Finland and Sweden, are justified in their belief that they need to build up a new military to protect themselves from an invasion by Russia?
No, I think that is so outrageous. I have always been of the belief, even when I was at the CIA, that the United States and Russia should be partners economically, militarily, diplomatically, in trade, in culture. I've always been of that belief. I do not see the Russians as aggressors in this war with Ukraine. I believe that it was the United States that instigated the Russian military action in Ukraine back in 2014. The U.S. just could not leave well enough alone, and the U.S. did not respect a democratic election in Ukraine in 2014. So no, I've always believed that we should be working hard to be friends with Russia. I've always believed that the real threat to the United States is China. It's not Russia. And it's been China for a very, very long time. The U.S. has missed more than several opportunities to try to improve relations with Russia. In fact, I'll tell you another thing. Several years ago, I'm going to say, let's see, we're in 2025. So in 2023, I was invited with a group of people here in Washington to have lunch with the Russian ambassador. It was about 8 of us. We had lunch with the Russian ambassador because we had all written articles complaining about U.S. foreign policy and saying we should be engaged diplomatically with the Russian government and we should be constantly talking to one another. So he organized this lunch so that we could try to hash out some of these issues. And he asked me specifically, is there a way in which Russia and the United States could cooperate even in a time of war? And I said, absolutely yes. I said, in counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, and counter-proliferation. I don't care how bad relations become between the United States and Russia, they still have identical national interests in those 3 places, in those 3 areas. And he asked me, if you were the Russian ambassador to the United States, what would you recommend to Moscow? And I said, these tit-for-tat arrests of each other's citizens. The Russians grab an American female basketball player, give her a draconian sentence for having, THC oil. The Americans grab Maria Butina and charge her with some ridiculous, stupid paperwork crime. I said, it's a bad look. It's a bad look for both countries. But it's an especially bad look for Russia in the West. And he got a little bit angry and he said, "Do you have any idea how many Russians are in American prisons?" "I'll tell you," he said. "It's 1,500. And I know that because I have to visit them." He said, "That's a bad look." And I said, "Excellency, you are absolutely right. But Americans aren't focused on that. Americans are focused on the optics of a basketball player who lives in Russia half the year being given 10 years in prison for having a little bit of weed oil. It's draconian." So we ended up not really accomplishing much, but it was a great exchange of ideas. The United States and Russia should be doing this on a regular basis at the highest levels, and they're not. And then the US did something to him that was really a cheap shot. The Russian ambassador's chef was a Russian national, came from Russia, and every year would win competitions in Washington as the best diplomatic chef in the entire diplomatic corps. And just to be jerks about it, the US revoked his visa and he had to return to Russia. Like, why? Why do something like that? It's just mean-spirited. It's just a stupid thing to do.
John, we're going to finish on this, and I'm not in a hurry by any means, because this has been so important and informative. Donald Trump has been claiming he wants to end the war in Ukraine. He's going to do it on the first day in office. The Alaska thing, okay, it's debatable that anything really happened. Nothing significant, concrete, but they got together. And now there's a 28-point peace plan that Russia can't accept that. Neither can Ukraine. My question to you is this. Do you think that Donald Trump is really struggling with a way to reestablish significant relationships with Russia and with Putin, yet this Ukraine thing is just hanging over his head that he just can't seem to get rid of? And yeah. I maintain it's probably not Trump, it's probably the UK.
Well, you may be onto something there. I really believe that Donald Trump believed that he had a personal relationship with President Putin and that he was going to be able to negotiate a settlement within a couple of weeks of becoming president again. When that didn't work, he believed that he had to engage more directly with President Putin. They engaged in Alaska, as you correctly noted. And I think that he just did not have an understanding of Russian grievances in this conflict. Donald Trump is very much a big picture president. He's not someone to get down into the details. He never has been, even as a businessman. And so I think he really thought that if he just called President Putin and said, "Look, end this war. Let's end this war. We'll come to an agreement. We'll let the diplomats work out the details, but just commit to ending the war." He really believed Putin would say yes. And it's because he didn't have a full understanding of the details.
I have to agree with you. But do you think, because from the Russian side, and this is what I read all the time, President Putin, Sergei Lavrov, and others have made it very clear for these past 4 or 5 years that Russia's basic security is really what's at the core of their demands.
Yes.
Dating back to 1991, the encroachment of NATO surrounding Russia. Do you think Trump is beginning to understand what Putin is trying to tell him? We are threatened by what the United States and NATO is. You don't think he gets it?
No, I don't think any American political figure gets it. I really don't. The American politicians don't understand that being virtually surrounded, not surrounded, but surrounded on the west side of their borders is for the Russians an existential threat. Because all we hear here in the United States All we hear from our own American media is the Russians want to invade Poland, or the Russians want to invade Romania. It's like, where did you get that? Who in the world led you to believe that the Russians want to invade Poland, of all things?
And Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the crazies of all.
Just crazy. Yeah, but that's what we're fed here.
One final question from a former CIA analyst and counterterrorism expert. The big talk right now is BRICS, and the emerging new multipolar world, which really means the end of the American Empire, the end of the 500 plus years of the British Empire. What is your take? Because I, like a lot of people, see this as an existential battle now, an epic battle for the future order of the world. Do you agree with that? And do you realize, or do you agree that it is probably more dangerous than more people would like to admit?
Oh, I think that the creation and expansion of BRICS is an existential threat to the United States, or to the American empire, really. And I can tell you that contacts of mine at the State Department are worried about BRICS, but what they're really worried about is that the BRICS countries are going to create a unified currency. Because as soon as they do that, the domination in global trade of the US dollar is over. And that's the end of the US empire.
John, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate how candid you've been about your background.
Thank you.
And how you conducted yourself throughout your career, what led you to the moral and the ethical decision to expose what the CIA was doing, and led you to become, with many of our mutual friends, a peace activist. John, I know you're very busy. I hope that I can have you back again in the future to continue the discussion about what is really starting to unfold that I believe could be a threat to all life on the planet.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back.